author and historian Dante King specializes in the implementation of the anti-racist practice. He speaks on topics such as racial equity, racial repair, and racial relief. Y'all check this out. So you cover some really deep topics. Why did you choose to write this book?
So my main purpose of writing the book was to contribute to a larger body of work. There are so many Black literaries and scholars who have been uplifting our voices for centuries. And so we can point to Ida B. Wells Barnett, we can point to W.E.B. Du Bois, we can point to Zora Neale Hurston, and so many others, James Baldwin. And I felt that in this particular period, in the 21st century, we needed an uncensored, unfiltered account of what Black people experience in this country and have continued to experience perpetually.
And this is all in your book.
Yes.
So when you say revolt against critical race theory, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so it's really a revolt against the truth. And so there's been a lot of controversy surrounding what people have begun referring to as CRT, or critical race theory.
Right.
And critical race theory is nothing but really the concept of looking at the ways in which the legal system and all of America's institutions have functioned in a racial way and have led to certain outcomes. So for instance, a few of the things that I cover in my book in evaluating the American legal system are the ways in which, as early as the 17th century, the mid-17th century, there's a law in 1669 called the Casual Killing Act.
Oh, wow.
And this law is essentially sanctioning that Christians who are referred to, as they are referred to in the law during that period, which are quote unquote white people,
Christians.
Can murder Black people without consequence. There's another law in 1680 that says the same thing.
This is a law that was written into legislation.
Yes,
Wow.
and sanctioned in the colony of Virginia. But when you go and you investigate all of legality throughout the British colonies, you see laws like this basically arising or emerging throughout every colony, which is essentially shaping the cultural apparatus of America, and it's shaping how we then deal with Black people and how white people are to be dealt with.
Wow.
And so by sanctioning legalized murder, when you get into the 1800s, I point to two laws in Chapter 3. It's about the way in which America sanctioned that Black women could not be raped. And so those are legal rulings along with statutes. And so
although they were being taken advantage of, it wasn't legally considered rape.
It wasn't, because in one particular ruling, the judge says that sexual intercourse, according to the ways in which it is looked upon for white women.
Christians?
Yeah, it cannot be viewed that way for Black people, because Black people are promiscuous. They say that in the court ruling.
They do?
Mississippi, 1859. Yeah, and then the Florida Supreme Court sanctions, this is 1918, so now we're talking the 20th century. My grandmother was born in 1919. They sanctioned that because Black women were immoral, they essentially couldn't be raped.
Really? That's so interesting. Yeah. Has that law changed? Or it's kind of like they include us now, but they don't listen to us as intensely or in truth to what has happened to our bodies, because that mindset is still there, that it's not as important as Christians' bodies? Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you
baby.
you definitely simplified it in just to a T. And because there are ways that we undervalue or devalue Black femininity and Black womanness and girlness differently than we have been trained to value white femininity, white girlness, white womanhood. And so once we begin to evaluate the effects of it, and so it's not necessarily that the law or the ruling has changed, but all of these things have led to a shaping of culture.
Correct.
And so you can see And in one of my recent lectures, I used a few examples from the book where these white men who are raping young girls, I think one raped 4 young girls that were under 18. The other assaulted another young lady on a college campus. Both judges gave them probation.
Were they black? The girls were black?
No, I'm not sure.
Or it doesn't matter. They were just Caucasian, and so
The white men received probation
Wow.
for rape. And so when you look...
doesn't it just, it's just so frustrating. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and just to think about all of the different fixed fights that we face on a daily basis is unbelievable. This seems like another fixed fight because you have already decided that I am not as valuable as a woman who is Caucasian or anything like that. So how do we win? Do you believe that racial equality is possible to achieve?
Not at all.
What do we do?
Well, we have to understand that, number one, it is not true that they're underlying this preoccupation to devalue and to degrade black people is what Dr. Alvin Poussant, who was the dean at Harvard for many years, the dean of psychiatry at Harvard, what he espoused as a mental illness. He says very frankly that white racism is a mental illness. In my book, I also quote from Dr. Bobby Wright, who was a psychologist back in the mid-'70s, early '80s. And he says that in their relationship to black people, that white people are psychopaths. And so
Oh, wow.
if you...
I don't want to believe that.
Well, and I'm not
all,
necessarily
yeah.
saying about people, trying to define them or what they are, but I do believe that there is some validity and when we begin to evaluate and interrogate men who sat on benches that sanctioned the rape and sexual assault of black women, that sanctioned a culture. The Supreme Court ruled between 1873 and 1900, there were 7 Supreme Court rulings that took away rights from black people. And in 2 of those rulings, they essentially ruled that white people could commit terrorism onto black people. And so you have all of these lynchings taking place. And there's even photographic memorabilia that is accessible to this day.
Yes.
And there was no accountability. So even when you look at law enforcement, right, if you have... People say, oh, well, we can maybe achieve or accomplish some sense of fairness at some point. Well, as long as there's under enforcement and people's families, and because of the way that they look, they can be let off or gotten out of trouble, if you will, there will never be a sense of fairness. There's also an article that I reference in my book where you have this white man who says that he became a teacher. He was a teacher for 17 years, but did not know how to read or write.
Oh, wow.
So that type of deficiency, insufficiency, mediocrity, white insufficiency, white deficiency is not available for black people.
Oh, no, we know that. We've got to be 10 times better, as they say, so to speak.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate, but it's a real thing. And as I said before, I do believe that it's a fixed fight. And I hope in some kind of way that on the other side, they will understand that they need to come to the plate and change some things so that we can be seen for who we are and not who they want us to be seen as.
Yes, and they need to change it about themselves.
Yes, changing the heart and then changing the laws. And I don't know how quickly one can do that.
Can I make one other point?
Yes, please.
Over time, if you begin to evaluate all of these laws through the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s that exploited and just served to marginalize black people, one of the things that I say is it led to an empathy deficit. So there's no empathy for black humanity. And so when you talk about changing hearts, there's contempt and hatred for black people. So that's why we see young black children being dealt with in the ways
and that's why we saw the murders at the elementary school yesterday and the top grocery store where they kill. It's just, we're targeted, and it's unfortunate, but you know what, at the end of the day, as a Christian, because I don't believe that Christianity is solely for a certain race, as a Christian today, I believe that it is God that will handle judging that. And I shall not judge people. I will continue to to love everyone, but just knowing that I love you for who you are. We're going to take a short break. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back with Just Being Honest.